if this is portable handheld blood glucose meter, you're going to validate that with the people who are going to use it, okay? And you're going to take them units that are coming off of your production line. Now, there are some ways around that. There are some where if your last round of prototypes is really close to what you're going to be producing, you can provide some evidence and some documentation saying, you know, yeah, we're going to change it, the cover to red instead of blue, but, you know, essentially everything in it is the same, and so you can sometimes do this with some late stage prototypes. The preference is get a few units off of your line so you can see exactly how they're going to be made and validate that design that way. And you're looking at design control and design transfer. So by getting units off of the production line, you're bringing in a whole other element into play. The design really transferred. Did you tell them everything they needed to know? Do they have the training? Do they have the work instructions? You know, do they have all these pieces? So, examples in this case is you may get to clinical trials at this stage if you need it. Glucose meter, maybe not so much, but if you're making some type of, you know, in vitro diagnostic, a pacemaker, or, you know, new device like that. You can do clinical trials. Sometimes they're in the clinical or non-clinical settings. Looking at the historical evidence showing that this type of a device is safe, because you need that for your safety section. Doing scientific literature reviews come into play with validation. Looking at your labeling and packaging. Labeling is going to be a very critical element because that's where you're going to inform the user of anything, you know, that needs to be done, should not be done, any kind of warnings. I think in this stage, there's labeling kind of ends up as a catch-all. If you're not able to fix something in the design, then you just tell the user, don't do that. Really, it's better to fix it in the design, and that's what the purpose of the design review is, so you can go back in and go. So if you can fix things without just sticking it on the labeling, that's really preferred. Some things we can't, you know, we have to have the labeling, we have to have warnings, we have to have precautions, so that's true. Another part of the design validation is risk management. And as I said, this is a huge topic all by itself, perhaps for another time. But there's an ISO standard that governs this. It is a very systematic review. You're going in, you're trying to identify any hazards or hazardous conditions with this device. Then you go in and evaluate that as to, well, how likely is it that that will happen? And if that does happen, what are the consequences? Is this a big deal or a little deal? And then there's a lot of calculations and things that go on inside this little black box. And then out here you get a number when you go through this. And it really tells you, is that an acceptable risk, or do you need to go back and do some more design work on it? The risk management document is very dynamic. You have to keep going back to it, and as things change, you need to reevaluate the risks so that you know that this device is going to end up being safe from this perspective. Tools here, FMEA, FTA, FMECA, HAZOP in some situations. That's a little more useful in the pharmaceutical industry, but I have seen it used here as well. So those kinds of tools, you really are going in, and it is very detailed. It takes a lot of time. People usually aren't real wild about getting into it, but this is one of the most valuable exercises through the whole design process that can really lead you to success in having a quality device out there without a lot of issues. Okay, so we got the device, it's all set up, it's all good to go, and now we want somebody to make it. Maybe you're making it in-house, or perhaps you're handing it off to a contract manufacturer. the better off your documentation is, the more clear those requirements are, the training instructions, the work instructions, the specifications, the sampling plans, all that needs to be really spelled out. So as these start to get made on the line, they're actually what you think you were intending to make. A lot of documentation comes out of this, as I mentioned, assembly drawings, your inspection and tests, quality inspection, either incoming inspection, in-process inspection, and final product release. It even gets down to the manufacturing jugs and molds. I mean, if you're going to transfer it there, they need to really have all of those drawings, dimensional ones. You've looked at, tolerance stack up. You've looked at everything across the board so that when it goes into the manufacturing environment, again, you're going to get what you think you've designed. Acceptance criteria, obviously very important here. The verified design parameters are in there. At the end of the design transfer, you finalize the device master record, and that's really the compilation of all these specifications and everything that governs that device. You assure at this point you get it in the change control system, because you don't want to make any changes unless everybody's looking at them, approving them, evaluating them, going back through risk management. And then you have to have your training documentation on board. Not just the production people, installation, servicing, you need it all the way through the process. And for devices, they have what's called a design history file. All along, you have these inputs, you have the outputs, you have the design review, verification, validation, transfer. Every step of the way, those activities are documented. And it's okay if things change, but at that meeting, at that time, that gets documented as what it is. And then as you go through the change control system, you can go back in and make changes to those and annotate why you made that change. This design history file, it ends up being binders and binders, depending on the scope and size of your device, and really tells that whole story. This is what the FDA wants to look at when they come visit you, to see, did you design your device according to the design controls? And it's interesting because they have the little booklet with the reg, and what's in there, it says you have to have procedures that describe inputs. You have to have procedures that describe your output. You have to have documentation. You have to have it signed off. It never tells you what the input needs to be or what the output needs to be, how the design review needs to happen. So you have a lot of latitude. It's just saying you have to document what you do, and that's what they're going to come in and look at. As you can see here, as you're going through that design process, you're going to have plans, the design review documents from your meetings, drawings, procedures, photographs, engineering notebooks. These don't all have to reside in a binder. A lot of times in there you'll just reference, that was in engineering notebook 29 and it's located wherever you keep those. So you don't have to physically locate everything together, but you do need to have a really good system if you're pointing to where other things are, that you can get to them. Has your V&V in there, and contractor and consultant information. You need to have CVs, you need to have people who are coming in and helping you out with things. You need to know that they're qualified, and that's a piece of it. Design change, this is pretty not unique to this industry, but going through the design control process, if you've done all that work, you really don't want to go in and make some kind of change and not really realize what that effect is on some other component. So you're looking for, when is change control required? When does it need to be reviewed? What are the reasons for the change? Again, if you're using contract manufacturing, how does that hand off when you're doing a change control? Is that something that's coming back to you to review? Is that something that's internal to them with notification to you? Something that really needs to be spelled out in your supply agreement. Looking at how that change might impact something else in the design. Maybe it impacts the packaging.